Congratulations. You made it to gate 3. Not bad, we're halfway there. All right, well, welcome to the gate 3 guide for Ivory Tower, or Voldis, whatever you want to call it. Now, this gate is so much simpler than the last one. It's a little bit harder than gate 1, but overall, fight's super easy. The biggest thing you have to worry about before going into this gate is that if you are a support, you got to make sure you take your damage reduction skills. So for Paladin, that's called God's Decree. For Bard, it's called Rhapsody. And for Artist, it's called Starry Night. So let's get started. Okay, so like usual, we are going to cover the items first. Now, believe it or not, the first item that you're taking into this fight is potions. Yeah, that's right. Same thing as always. Next, you are going to be taking Whirlwind Grenades. These things are used for the big long stagger check. It's one of the mechs later in the fight that we'll talk about later. The next item you're going to take is either Destruction Bombs or Corrosive Bombs. Normally, it's on the support to take the Corrosive, but as long as you communicate with your team who's going to be taking the Corrosive versus the Destructions, then it's all fine. These are used to obviously clear any destruction check during the fight, but mostly focused on the one at the end of the first mechanic. And then for the last item slot, you have a couple options. You can take Time Stops if you want to play safe. You can take Atropines if you're comfortable using them, or if you're support and you want more meter gen to pump out more buffs or more heals, then you can take a Stimulant. Okay, so the first thing when you start this fight, you're going to stack together, and the support is going to DR when these red circles show up. You're going to take one hit and then jump out. This gives you 4 stacks of a burn debuff that persists throughout the entire fight. Getting hit by most attacks will give you more stacks. This debuff is good up until you have 5 stacks. You will gain a damage increase. If you get knocked into the water at any time during the fight, it will remove all of your stacks. When your stacks are at 10 or more, the burn actually starts to hurt, so you should try to get knocked into the water to remove your stacks. Okay, there are 3 important mechanics throughout this fight. First mechanic is at 145 bars. The boss will jump to the middle, then summon 4 pillars around him, but 1 at a time. Keep track of the order that each one of these pillars spawns in. The boss will then target a player and charge at them, then change targets and charge again up to 4 times. Each charge needs to be directed to the 4 pillars, but in the same order that they showed up. So for example, in this video, they showed up in the order bottom, right, top, left. While all this is happening, you're going to need to be dodging blue circles and aiming the boss at the correct places. If you get hit by a blue circle, you get stunned for a really long time. If you miss a pillar, it explodes and does a ton of damage as well as a bunch of other bad stuff. If you hit all 4 pillars in the right order, the boss will get staggered and has a big, long destruction check. So at this point, the support's going to throw their Corrosive Bomb, and all the DPS are going to throw their Destruction Bombs, and everyone's going to do as much destruction as you can. It's okay to fail this destruction check. All of the destruction throughout this fight is additive, so as much destruction as you do right here, even if you don't clear it, the next time you get a chance to do destruction, it will add on to what you did this first time. The second mechanic is a timed event. So if your party does enough damage really fast during this fight, then you might actually skip it. What's going to happen is the camera will zoom out, and the boss is going to pull this giant pillar out of the ground. Then he's going to use this pillar as a weapon for a while. If you get hit by any of his attacks with this pillar, then you gain a debuff that makes you take more damage for the next 10 seconds from any of his other attacks. So if you get hit, play carefully. When he first pulls the pillar out of the ground, a blue timer dial will show up under his feet. This is the amount of time that you have to stagger the boss. Right when this shows up, everyone's going to throw their whirlwinds and use as many stagger skills as they can. It's a fairly long stagger check, and if you throw your whirlwinds right away, you'll actually have a chance to throw a second whirlwind before the timer ends. Just keep staggering the boss until he falls down. The third mechanic happens around 45 bars. The boss will jump to the middle and summon a ton of pillars around him. You're going to find a gap in the pillars and stack with your team there in the gap. Now, the support has a very special role here again. If you have Awakening when this mechanic starts, you should use it, but the most important thing is that you use your DR when your team gets to this gap. The boss is going to jump and slam on the ground, and it does a ton of damage, but the DR will actually negate most of it. After the boss slams the ground, he's going to get a stagger bar. This is very easy to clear. You can throw your whirlwinds or use a couple ranged stagger skills. But the second you clear this stagger, he's going to knock everyone back into the water. This is what you want to happen. When you're in the water, you are protected from the wipe pattern. If you don't get knocked into the water, you will die. After this third mech, the boss gains some new basic attacks and some evolved versions of the old ones, so play carefully until the end of the fight. One more thing you will need to learn how to do during this fight is the swimming minigame. So if you get knocked into the water, you get this minigame that you have to clear before you get out. It has 2 phases. Phase 1 is to press your spacebar rapidly as fast as you can to fill up this blue bar. Phase 2 is to hold down the spacebar while the yellow pong paddle bounces up and down inside the meter. The goal is to release the spacebar when the pong paddle is at the top of your purple bar inside the meter. These 2 phases rotate back and forth until you completely fill the meter and jump out of the water. Also, this game gets harder and harder every single time you get knocked into the water, so try not to get knocked in too much. One other thing to look out for during this fight is the boss's charges. If you notice that he's doing a charge attack and it's targeted on you, then you can aim him at one of these pillars that spawn during the fight to knock him out and give your party another chance to hit destruction. When you clear destruction checks in this fight, he becomes way weaker and much easier to deal with for a pretty good chunk of time. Now, there are a lot of other normal patterns that can be kind of tough to learn, but there's not a lot that should instantly kill you, so most things you can just potion through if you're taking too much damage. I'm not going to go over too many of the normal patterns. That's stuff that I believe you guys can figure out on your own. However, there are a few counter opportunities in this gate. The first chance to counter is when he swings his horns back and forth 2 times. There's a counter on the second swing. The second opportunity to counter is when he lifts his horns and his front feet way up off the ground, and then he tries to slam back down. You can counter before he does the slam. The third one, and probably the most important one, is when he does a grab with his horns. So there's a couple different ways that he can grab players with his horns, but if any of your teammates get turned into a shish kebab on the end of the boss's horns, he's then going to turn at one of the pillars that have spawned on the map. You can see the pillars on your minimap, by the way. They show up as a little red dot. So the boss is going to turn at one of these pillars once a player is shish kebabbed. He's going to try to charge them into the pillar. Before the charge, he will become counterable. If you hit this counter, it gives you another chance to do destruction. Now, there is one more pattern that I'll talk about briefly. This one doesn't happen until after you clear the 45 bar mechanic. Now, for this attack, he's going to lock onto a player, and he's going to pull back one of his front hands behind him. Then he's going to charge forward and try to grab the person he's looking at. If he happens to grab someone, he's going to do what is probably one of the coolest attacks I've ever seen a boss do in this game. So because I don't want to spoil it for you guys, I'll just leave it at that. If you want to see what happens, just go ahead and get grabbed. And that's it. Like I said, obviously there are a lot of normal patterns that I didn't cover, but none of them are too scary. And for the most part, if you're not in front of the boss, you're safe from a lot of them. But you'll figure it out. Anyway, I really hope this guide helps. Let me know how things go. And as always, thanks for watching.